Good evening, everybody. Chef Suzanne and I welcome you to another fine live session, week 10 here in CU 122. And this class rocks. You guys have been killing it left and right. We got together a little bit earlier, and I mentioned this in some of the class messages. We're striving to make this class number one as far as our on-time submissions and posting attendance. And I've been bragging to the other instructors that this is possible because this class is incredible. So I'm asking you, and so is Chef Suzanne, that if we could all please join together and make that happen and walk out of here number one in the school, that would be awesome. And that means getting all of our assignments turned in on time and making sure that we post attendance on a regular basis. And I have a lot of faith. One of the reasons we do that is culinary arts, and for those of you that are in industry, you already know this, culinary arts is a true team effort. And there's not one great cook in the kitchen that makes it happen. It's about all of us that make it happen. So we are asking that each one of you be the one that helps your class to reach this goal. So I know it can be done. So make it happen. Hey, ladies and gents, week 9 in CU 122. I hear lots of great things, and I saw some great things coming through. There were a couple of questions still regarding conversions. You don't have to worry about converting because your scale does that for you. So on your scale, there's a little button that'll take it from ounces to grams. So don't spend a lot of time trying to convert. There were also a couple of other questions that popped up regarding, not proofing right or not mixing right, et cetera, et cetera. Really important last week, this week, and with all other techniques that you're learning is to pay real close attention to the technique being taught, follow it as it is, and then make sure that you follow the recipe to the T. Because what happens when you stray from the technique, that's when things go awry. And Chef Suzanne can probably back me up on this one as well, but I remember as a young culinarian when I was making breads and pies and everything else, I'd get to a certain point in the technique and I would think to myself, oh, I can skip this, I can do this faster, I can do it better, right? These things aren't new, people. They've been around for a long, long time. So, really focus on learning that technique. Once you've mastered the technique, that's when you can start deciding, hey, I want to go left or right. But don't make that decision until you know. Isn't that right, Chef Suzanne?
I actually had a bit of an advantage there. My father, while I was growing up, worked in commercial industrial bakeries where they would make, millions of loaves of bread. And I would actually see people and meet people when we go see him that actually had degrees in bakeology. And so I knew the science behind it, that they had to study science and chemistry. And so I had kind of like that background, being able to see all that and know that, they had to test batches and how specific in the science bread is.
Yeah.
And so being able to see it firsthand like that, I definitely, but even then, yeah, you'd be making something, be like, I can just add a little extra this or a little extra that, and chaos, total chaos.
Yep. So definitely, absolutely, that's great advice. Definitely stick with the technique. It's very, very important. And rolling into this week, it's going to be the same show over again. Just pay attention to the technique. I know that Chef Suzanne has some great stuff to share from week 9 with those baguettes that we prepared. Chef Suzanne?
Okay, can you see my screen?
Uh-huh.
Awesome. Yeah, I cannot even with the folks this week. Hang on, I'm just going to show you because words can't do it justice. They went above and beyond to the point where I was like, there's actually a pool party going on at my house. And I actually had to call everybody in, like, look at this bread, look at this presentation. So I liked chat here because you can see before, then you can see after it proofed with the slashes, and then that gorgeous GBD on his bread. And the same with Michaela and that gorgeous bread, and then the interior picture. Check out Donald this week.
Chef Don in the house. Look at that, man.
Isn't that amazing? Monique made some, I believe this is crab dip. that looks just to die for with her gorgeous bread.
Fantastic.
Look at this. Isn't that beautiful?
Wow.
So they went above and beyond with their presentation and with their garnishes.
Great job, Anthony.
I know, right? They did. They just totally kicked booty. Virginia rocking it out with some gorgeous presentation as always. Latrice took it to a po' boy. Hello. That was amazing. Right?
Where were we for all this?
I don't know. It's nice to see, you know, bottles of wine and stuff, but I was like, oh, shut up. That looks delicious. I would totally eat that sandwich.
I want the po' boy.
Right. Andrew has some French onion soup because soup. Yes. Yum.
Yum.
Christopher also went the sandwich direction, which I just totally loved.
Wow.
Taylor, I mean, just I'm telling you, Chef, it was so much fun to grade these because I never knew what the next assignment is going to look like, what's going to be in it.
Wow.
So, yeah, to say they really.
Those look fantastic.
Don't they look great?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I can honestly say I did not make any bread this week, but pretty sure it's going to be on my list of things to do this weekend. I'm going to have to make bread. I've just seen too much. So it just looks so good. And the photos, everybody's doing really good about making sure not to forget any photos. And I think it makes it a little easier with something like this to make sure that everything is included. Lots of great information and narratives. And I love that folks have been reaching out this week. If you've got a question or running into an issue, like I'm not sure what I did, what can I do? I've got everything, I'll make it again. So you guys just really wowed me just to pieces this week. So thank you.
I'm really, really impressed with the level of this class. You know, and Chef Suzanne and I aren't just saying that because we have a lot of classes and we get some classes that just aren't quite there yet. And this class makes it really worth it. So you guys are rocking the house. It's very, very impressive. I saw some very Instagram-worthy photos there. That was really impressive. And then just a quick side note for those of you that like Instagram, make sure that the pictures are yours. Plagiarism is something that we take very seriously here at Escoffier, using somebody else's work or finding somebody else's work. We didn't have that this week, fortunately, but you know, sometimes we run a little late and we decide, you know, that we're going to pull something from somewhere else to show that picture. It doesn't work out too well because Chef Suzanne is very attuned to that type of thing. Isn't that right, Chef Suzanne?
I don't know. I swear I do. I have a sixth sense about that. I can just look at a picture or information and I just know that something's not quite right. So I don't know how. I apologize, y'all. My kids say the same thing. They can't get away with anything. I'm always watching. I don't know. It's just natural. Sorry.
So ladies and gentlemen, do not send us a picture with Gordon Ramsay in the background telling us you made that frittata or whatever the case may be, because it doesn't work out so well. So congratulations, everybody, on the great work on week 9. We are progressing quickly as we enter into week 10. We have 3 weeks in this class, 10, 11, and 12 left. And we want to make sure that everybody succeeds. If any of you out there are concerned about where you're at as far as your grade is concerned, now is the time to reach out. Do not wait till week 12 to extend the olive branch, so to speak. We've contacted all of you that do have some concerns in that area. And this block, we are asking that all assignments, including makeup assignments, are due at the end of week 11. So we are not waiting until week 12 as customary. Let's take a look at this week's presentation here. I'm learning how to switch screens. Usually I teach with 3 different monitors going at the same time, and now that we're nomads, once again, things are a little different. Everybody can see the screen fine? Okay, fantastic. So week 9, awesome job, fantastic, everybody. Those baguettes were worthy. The poor boy, that's done me in because now I'm hungry and I don't know if I can teach the rest of the class. I mean, that thing was fantastic. So great job, everybody. Let's finish strong. We have 3 weeks in this class. Do not put the brakes on. Trust me, you are here to learn, Take full advantage of it because the more you do it today, the better you're going to be tomorrow. All makeup work will be due no later than Tuesday, June 18th. That is the last day of week 11. Now's the time to get your makeup work in. If you submitted an assignment and you do not feel comfortable with that assignment, you can always reach out to Chef Suzanne or myself, and we'll be glad to make accommodations to allow you to resubmit. So, let's make this happen. Let's really crank the GPA in this class. Everybody is capable of doing that. So the PowerPoint presentations are always located on the class page underneath the recipe. They are labeled week, whatever it is. So on this tonight's presentation will be labeled week 10 right underneath Focaccia, and it's that way for all of the weeks. So if you have additional questions, it's a great tool of reference for all of you. Does anybody have any questions so far? Strong, looking good? Let's move forward to our next topic of conversation. There's a lot of characteristics that are involved in being a chef, and each week we like to show you a different chef to take a look at. And this fellow brings up some fantastic points about the qualities of a good chef. Let's take a look at what he has to say.
Not hearing that, Chef.
No.
At least I'm not hearing it. I don't know if anybody else can hear it. I cannot hear it.
Well, under those circumstances, we're going to leave that video for all of you to take a look at on your own. And the whole point of that video is it discusses professionalism. And I know that a lot of us get into the world of culinary arts, and not all of us are Oxford graduate or Oxford trained attorneys and the most professional folks in the world. But we do expect a certain level of professionalism when it comes to culinary arts, especially once you get up to the managerial level. And the more that you present yourself in a professional fashion, the better you're going to be in the long run. So I highly recommend taking a few moments to look at that video whenever you have the opportunity to do so. He gives us some fantastic advice. Let's take a look at week 10 here in CU 122. Sorry, I'm not fully presented here, but it's a technical thing. All right, ladies and gents. Week 10 in CU 122, make sure you pay close attention to the research materials. It talks about breads, it talks about straight dough. The research materials lead you to the answers in the knowledge check. Remember that you can take that knowledge check as many times as you like, and only the highest score will stick. Week 10 conversions knowledge check, 5 questions. Easy 10 points right there. So make sure that you get those done. Same thing, you can take that as many times as you like. And then thank you very much, everybody, for being here for the week 10 live session. The students that attend the live session and the students that watch the live session archive are always the ones that succeed, 100% across the board. This week in the kitchen, we are working on focaccia, as many of you know, and there's a fantastic recipe right on the bottom, and right underneath there will be this week 10 presentation. Here's a little prep list for everybody. Chef Suzanne and I love to make a prep list. Every day we make one about what we need to do and how we need to accomplish it. Wednesday, watch that live session. Thank you, everybody, for being here. On Thursday, take a few minutes, read and understand the research materials, complete both knowledge checks. Super simple. And then on Friday, sit down, grab a cup of coffee, enjoy that nice weather outside, read and understand the assignment. Create a prep list. Just write down what you're going to prep, when you're going to prep, how you're going to prep it, and what you need. And then decide what mise en place you need. Make sure you get it purchased. Real simple this week. Flour, yeast, olive oil, herbs. And then prepare and submit the assignment Saturday and Sunday. And then resubmit the assignment as suggested by Chef Suzanne on Monday and Tuesday. Number 1, you maintain attendance throughout the week. Number 2, it's organized. You know what's coming your way. You can make it happen. And what does that say down there at the bottom, Chef Suzanne?
Be your amazing self every day.
I love that. That is fantastic. Because I think this class has a lot of amazing selves in it. So that is our week here in CU 122. Moving on to our next page, our weekly conversions chart here. And I know this seems redundant. You guys are probably getting tired of doing conversions. Trust me, when you get into industry, it's something that you're going to rely upon, and you're going to be very thankful that you did. And there's this fellow here. I don't always use a calculator, but when I do, I hit both C and CE a bunch of times because I don't know exactly which one does what. So that's very good information. As a matter of fact, I catered his going away party. It was a $200,000 party that was put on by Dos Equis for the world's most interesting man. And when they pulled him away and they were no longer using him in their advertising, we were the ones that were chosen to do his going away party. So he's a very special.
That makes me even more happy that I used that picture. I'm really glad I found that one so you could tell that story.
Yeah, it brought something warm to my heart. Yeah, it's kind of cool in culinary arts, and as you grow in this industry and you get to take on different positions, it's amazing the amount of people that you get to meet, from presidents down to rock stars to movie stars. I've had the opportunity to work with them all. I don't know them and I don't have relationships with them, but just being able to take care of people like Antonio Banderas, the Doobie Brothers, Styx, Willie Nelson, and there's just hundreds that I've had the opportunity to work with, and it's kind of neat. And it's good story time or elevator talk if you ever need it. Moving on past the knowledge checks, we're going to talk just a little bit about the straight dough method, which is what we are working with this week. Very similar to last week's method as well. Straight dough is a single process of making the bread. You basically put all of your ingredients together into the mixing bowl, and you begin mixing until the dough becomes smooth, and you begin a bulk fermentation of the product. Chef Suzanne brought up a great point. The recipe does not call for the use of a mixer with a dough hook this week. However, if you would like to use one, certainly feel free to take advantage of it. Do not use the paddle. Do not use the whisk to make the dough. Use the dough hook. Right? Isn't that right, Chef Suzanne? You ever try to make bread with a paddle?
No.
I have. It doesn't work.
I imagine not.
No.
Probably like making cake with the dough hook. I feel like that would be just as bad.
Like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, follow the technique, because these mistakes that we talk about and these cautions that we give you are things that we've done wrong, right? That, you'll just save yourself a lot of heartache. Not Chef Suzanne. She would never do, she would never do something like that. All right, ladies and gents. So that's the straight dough method. That also goes by the direct dough method. We like to use instant yeast when working with this. And as you remember, instant yeast and active dry yeast. Active dry yeast, you have to activate it by putting it into a warm water, 90 to 100 degrees, allow it to blossom, give off the carbon dioxide and the alcohol, whereas the instant yeast can go straight in to your mix. And so that's the difference between those two. Does anyone have any questions so far? Anything? Ladies and gents, let's talk focaccia bread. Focaccia bread is extremely universal. We use it for a lot of different things in the kitchen. You can make fantastic sandwiches with it. You can make wonderful toast points with it. You can use it for flatbread pizza. You can use it just to serve as a regular dinner bread. So it's an extremely versatile bread that you can work with. And we'll get into it a little bit more here in a second. But first, we have a question from Chitvan. What's up?
Hi, Chef. So I was looking at the recipe for the focaccia bread, and it looked like it's very similar to the French bread, at least the first few steps are. So are we basically doing the same exact thing for the first till we ferment it?
That is correct. It is both. They are both straight dough methods. So that's a technique that we're learning right now, and that's the technique that we're mastering.
Okay,
so,
great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, ladies and gents, let's talk focaccia. All right. It's an Italian bread. The big thing that makes focaccia and kind of separates it from a baguette is the use of the herbs and the use of the olive oil. Both the baguette and the focaccia are both straight dough methods, or direct dough methods is the way that they are prepared. But it is extremely simplistic in nature. It's supposed to have more of a rustic appeal to it, whereas the baguette is kind of shaped and formed. We cut the top of it. The baguette is, or the focaccia is supposed to be not quite square, not quite smooth over the top, and have those lovely dimples. So don't be concerned about making it an exact bread this week. So we talked about the different yeast. This is the same slide that we have in the presentation last week. We talked about the active dry yeast, and we also talked about the instant yeast. So this will answer your questions when you're going to make the recipe this week. So you can refer back to this if you're not sure which yeast to use. Any questions so far? And Kenneth, what's up?
In the reading, in the professional cooking, in the recipe for the focaccia, it says to steam for the first 10 minutes. So in the recipe that's in our reading for the recipe, it doesn't mention. You're going to steam. So when I steam, I have a bread recipe, and basically this is throw ice cubes into the oven. So are we going to steam, or are we going to not steam? No,
we're going to follow the exact recipe that's on the page, the focaccia page. However, when they're asking you to steam, the steam creates kind of a crispier crust.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great question. The reason they're doing that, it's the same thing you do with Italian baguettes. Italian baguettes are really crispy, and when you tear into them, they kind of fall, it crumbles down onto the floor. That's why we add the steam. Many commercial ovens have the capability to inject steam into them. And so the first couple of minutes of the baking process, you hit the button and that injects steam.
Understood. Thanks, Jeff.
Gotcha. You're welcome. All right, ladies and gents, let's move on to our next slide. We're talking about olive oils now. And I thought I would just touch on this briefly without going into too much detail about it. There's basically 3 types of olive oils that are out there. And the first olive oil is extra virgin olive oil, which we hear a lot about. Most of you know at this point that's not a great oil to cook with. It has a very low smoke point, and once it reaches about 350 degrees, it becomes bitter. So
but they kind of like wine. They smell it and they're tasting it and they rate it. And so that's what they're doing with the extra virgin olive oil. All right, so then if there's additional pressing, it can also come from the first pressing, but also from additional pressings, they're going to get virgin olive oil. So it's like extra virgin olive oil is going to be the best of the best. Then you're getting the virgin olive oil that's not quite as good. It's like sort of as good, but not quite. And then the cheapest, and depending on what you're doing with it, the best value is going to be your pumice olive oil. So if it's something where you're just cooking in it and the flavor so much doesn't matter, pumice oil is great. But if you're going to drizzle it over something, or you really want that olive oil flavor to come through, you want to make sure to be using something like an extra virgin. Does that make sense? Everybody good with that? All right, so Willie, I see your hand is up. You still got a question?
I do. And maybe I have a misunderstanding, but the steaming are we required to steam? If we are, how can we do it in our home?
It's really hard to do in a home oven. It doesn't really work the same way. So imagine like a big fancy oven in a bakery. There's a way that they can just literally hit a button and steam or like water will go into the oven and it makes the outside extra crunchy. So it's next to impossible to do from home. I've heard some where you can spray water in the oven and slam the door real quick, but it's not really quite the same. So I would just kind of hang out with the recipe that's in the class page, but know that there are a lot of recipes in commercial bakeries that are going to have that steam injection in there. So it is very cool, but it's not something that you'll have to worry about. It's good to know, definitely good to know that it is an option.
Okay.
Right, so
Thank you.
Yeah, especially in the deck ovens and those types of things, you do see that. So,
Chef is back. We rolled on without you. We did a little bit of talking about some oils and pressing and extra virgin, and pomace. I think we're good.
yeah.
We just kind of hit on that a little bit. So I was just heading into the focaccia recipe on the next slide.
Awesome. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. The internet dropped, and so welcome to Mexico.
We were cool. We just rolled right on with it.
Like I was never, like nothing happened. That's what show business is. That's what show business is all about. I mean,
That's
it's
why I'm the co-host. She like literally handed me the microphone. I was like, cool, my turn.
it's kind of funny, and I think that all of you, it sounds like that 99% of these people are going in the industry and they're going to be rock stars. But there's going to be days when you're in the industry and at 4:30 in the afternoon, it's like hell in the kitchen and things are flying all over the place and the servers are scrambling. And then at 5 o'clock, all of a sudden the curtain goes up and everybody's, very right there, ready to go. So the show does go on and it does happen. And sometimes there are burps, but you got to pull it off one way or the other. So you make it happen. So thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Rockstar Chef Suzanne picked up the slack right there. The olive oils we talked about, I always think extra virgin #1, virgin #2, and pomace #3. I like pomace olive oil for general cooking purposes. It seems to be a little smoother and silkier than other oils. And it's also great for making mayonnaise and other emulsified dressings.
I didn't even think of mayonnaise. I like literally blanked. I was like, you can use it for, and
and it's a lot less expensive than the other oils, and it does have a little bit of a higher smoke point, so you can get away with your saute purposes. I used it much back in the so it does work real well. So let's move on to our recipe this week. Great catches, by the way. This class pays very close attention to detail. Stephen brought up a thing a little bit earlier today about something that was in the actual assignment submission that should not have been there regarding the dough hook. We did mention earlier, though, if you do decide to do this in your KitchenAid or stand mixer, that is perfectly fine. We will need a picture of it, please, for Chef Suzanne. So let's take a look at the actual assignment this week. The big thing here is to follow exactly the way this is written, because it does work quite well. So the step one is to combine all of your ingredients. When you go to bake, make sure that you follow the recipe exactly. Chef Suzanne alluded to the fact earlier in this class that it's a very scientific process, and it absolutely is. Too much yeast, too much salt, too little salt, whatever the case is all going to have direct effects upon your final product. So make sure that you do follow the recipe as written. Step one, you're just putting everything in the bowl together, right? You're going to mix it. It can be a little bit shaggy, just like last week's French bread dough. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth initially. And then you're going to let that rest for about an hour. And what you're doing is you're allowing those glutens to relax, and you're also allowing that yeast to start giving off the alcohol and the carbon dioxide. Make sure that you have a clean, smooth work surface for this particular assignment. Light dust light dust on your work surface, and then you're going to pull that dough from your bowl, and you're going to place it down onto your bench. That's what we call it in the industry, and at home you call that your work surface. And then you're going to be folding it over into thirds, very similar to what you were doing with the French dough. You're going to be kneading it in that fashion. And after that's done and the dough becomes smooth, you're going to shape it into a rectangle, fold it into thirds, return it back to the bowl, let it hang out 30, 45 minutes. Let those glutens relax, let that yeast keep working. Then you're going to repeat step two a couple of more times. Now you have option A, B, or C here to work with. And one is to put it into a plastic bag, let it ferment overnight in your refrigerator, which is something I like to do. I think it has a deeper, better flavor, especially from the yeast, and the gluten seem to behave a little bit better as well. Option B is to go ahead and oil a half sheet pan and then place the dough on the sheet pan, stretch it out, pull it, and then you're going to let it ferment at room temperature for a couple of hours until the dough fills up the pan. Make sure that your oven's at 450 degrees when you go to bake. And then you're going to, if you don't have a spray bottle for your olive oil, you can certainly get some onto your hands, kind of rub it around. You're going to rub that onto your dough. And then you need to make your dimples using your fingers. Dip, dip, dip. And we're going to show you that here in just a second. Chef Suzanne put together a great slide for that, as a matter of fact. And then you're going to put that half a sheet pan of focaccia directly in the oven. So make sure that when the focaccia comes out, the way that you tell it's done is it's going to have that nice GBD, that golden brown texture. It's going to be slightly crispy on the outside, and then you're going to smell it, right? If you still smell alcohol coming from the product, that means the yeast is not dead, and most likely the dough is still raw. So that is the big indicating factor. I see some hands up out there. Who has a question? Chef Suzanne? Can you see who has a question? I can't see my.
I can. It looks like Don has a question.
Don, what's up?
Hey, so using the dough hook and the mixer, how would you fit that? Like, you know, because the recipe doesn't like give you the, you know, it doesn't tell you like how you use the machine. So where would you replace using the machine in the actual recipe? Like, what's the technique for that?
Steps 1 and 2. You're going to put all your ingredients into your mixing bowl with your dough hook. You're going to let it mix for just a couple of minutes. You don't want a smooth dough at that stage. It can still be kind of shaggy, right? And turn your machine off, cover your bowl, let it hang out for about an hour. And then you'll go ahead and you'll turn the machine back on. You'll let it knead for a couple of minutes. The dough is becoming smooth. Turn it off. Let it rest for 30 minutes. Cover it up while it's resting. You can use a damp towel or you can use a piece of plastic wrap. And then you're going to repeat step 2 a couple of times. Does that help?
Awesome. Yes. Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Willie, what's up? Willie. You there, Willie? All right. How about Chick Van? Do you have another question?
Yes, chef. So if I wanted to put in toppings like sun-dried tomatoes or some sliced olives, at what point would you recommend putting them on?
Directly before they go into the oven.
Okay, so you just place them on the top, you just press them in a little bit, or
you just gently press them in just a touch. You're gonna press them in, then you're gonna let them do their final proof, and then it goes into the oven.
Okay, so you mean at the shaping time? At the shaping time.
After the shaping, after you do the dimples.
Okay. Okay. All right. Got it.
Yeah, then you're gonna let it proof a little bit. Then it goes into the oven.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, chef.
And then Chef Suzanne. So if someone chooses to put olives or something on there, the dimples still have to be visible so we understand that you know the technique. So
right.
And with focaccia bread, less is more when it comes to putting toppings on it. So you don't want the whole thing covered with Kalamata olives. You don't want the whole thing covered with roasted tomatoes or the whole thing covered with herbs. It's just a light touch. It's to accentuate the flavor. That's it. So on a half sheet pan of focaccia bread, you're probably talking 15 to 20 halves of olives on there, and that's it, no more. Does that answer everybody's questions? We all good? Ladies,
yes, chef.
All right. Ladies and gents, let's move on to our next slide so we can start taking a look at the development of the dough. This video is in your weekly presentation. It is also on the class page. We're not going to show it because we're having some technical challenges, so we don't want to burn that. This next slide is very, very important. This is how you can tell when your dough is completely done and mixed. I call this, well, I don't call it, but when your dough pulls clean from the side, right? But when you push your finger in there and it kind of sticks to your finger a little bit, I call it a kiss, right? It's like you're touching the dough and it kisses as it comes back. That means that your dough is done. It needs to have the ability to still be slightly tacky, but pull clean from the sides of the bowl or be pulling clean from your cutting board. That means that you have enough flour in there. Should you go to touch the dough and the dough releases clean from your finger, you've gone too far. You want to have some tackiness left in that dough. So please remember, it's easier to add more flour, but it's really tough to take it out. So if you need to add a little bit more flour, be very gentle and add a slight amount. It is very, very difficult for anyone to tell you exactly how much flour to add, because a cup of flour in Miami, Florida is radically different than a cup of flour in Tucson, Arizona. And the reason for that is the levels of humidity in the air and the time of year affect how much moisture flour can absorb. So, you know, you have to play it by ear a little bit. What you're trying to end up with is that slightly tacky touch and the dough pulling free from the sides of the bowl. Now, taking a look, we have two pictures here. We have one that's getting ready to proof, and then what it'll look like after it's done proofing, and what's going on. You've developed your glutens, and that alcohol and carbon dioxide are forcing that dough to rise. The glutens are holding it in place. And then once you hand stretch this, we mentioned a few moments ago, focaccia bread is not a bread that you want to be exact. It has to have some slight rustic appeal to it, right? So don't roll it out exactly the size of your sheet pan and then wait for the glutens to relax and then trim it up exactly. It's not going to be exactly perfect. It's okay if it weaves and wiggles just a little bit in there. You're going to hand stretch it out onto your half sheet pan that is oiled. Now, once you have it on your sheet pan, like is pictured right up here, you're going to take your fingers and you're going to do your dimples, just like that. And then this is what one looks like after it's been spritzed with the olive oil and sprinkled with fresh herbs. The recipe this week refers to fresh herbs. We prefer rosemary. That seems to be the most traditional with focaccia. And Chef Suzanne was this, she added this amazing picture of this. I don't know if he's an actor or who he is.
He's not. My husband has the biggest dimples of any person I ever met in my entire life. This picture doesn't even do it justice. He looks like the Joker when he smiles, and that is not even a joke. So I didn't get a picture of the eye roll or the look like I was absurdly crazy for asking him to do this, but when I was looking at Chef's PowerPoint here, I was like, ooh, dimples. I'm going to need you to hold this olive oil. Here's some fresh rosemary. So I had way too much fun with this, and I have been chuckling all day because of it.
I think that's fantastic. He's such a great sport for participating. Yeah, it's amazing what chefs do to each other. Yeah.
But it didn't seem, he works in a kitchen. This did not seem weird to anybody else that worked with him. They were just like, this seems perfectly normal. Yeah,
It is.
perfectly normal. I brought some rosemary out of the yard, and I was like, here, honey, I'm going to need you to hold this. Smile. Look at me with your dimples. Oh, here, now hold the rosemary and the olive oil. Yeah, I had way too much fun. I'm not even going to lie.
Little does he know that several hundred students are taking a look at him right now, smiling. So poor fellow. Yeah, hopefully he doesn't charge us a royalty for his picture, but we'll find out. So with the sprinkling, the recipe does call for herbs. Rosemary is probably the most traditional. If you do have access to it, you just want to run a knife through it just once or twice. It doesn't have to be exact. Once again, this is a very artisanal style of bread, the focaccia. So some pieces will be small, some a little bit larger, and a light sprinkling of it. If you go heavy with rosemary, it will make people abstain from eating it because it can be a very strong herb. So less is more. You just want to accentuate the flavor. That's it. It should have a hint of rosemary. Very, very important. So this is what your finished product is going to be taking a look like here. You should have a nice leavening going on. You can see where the gluten structure is taking effect here. That olive oil almost gives it like a pizza, is that Pizza Hut type crust down there on the bottom. This has a nice light sprinkling of rosemary over the top and nice olive oil. So it's got a nice little sheen to it. And this is what your finished product will be like. I highly recommend that when it comes out of the oven, wait for a minute or two and then put it onto a wire rack to allow it to cool. It'll help create a much more even texture throughout your entire piece of focaccia. Anything to add to that, Chef Suzanne?
I don't think so. I know there is a question. We'll talk about it here in a second. There's an issue with the recipe again that it's a really good question that other people may run into. So when you're ready to pull the recipe back up in just a second.
Sure, let's do that. What's the question?
Okay, so it is a really good question, and I feel like it'll come up again. The recipe down in step option B and option A talks about putting 25 grams of olive oil in the pan, but step 1, the very first thing, it says combine all ingredients in a bowl.
Good catch. It's 50 grams of olive oil into the dough and then the 25 after. So that's I'll send out a class message to make sure that everybody understands that. So it's going to be 25 into the dough and then 50 into the dough and then 25 over the top. 50 in the dough, 25 over the top. Any other questions about that?
That's the only one I've seen so far. I know Donald has a question, but I don't know if there's any other
Donald,
questions about the rest.
what's up, Donald?
Yeah, this is just there was some chatter about dry and fresh herbs. Does it matter? Is there what would be the difference?
If all you have, if all you have is access to the dried herbs, that's perfectly fine. However, the fresh herbs, herbs are something that we refer to in the food industry as aromatics, and aromatics are a plant-based item such as carrots, onions, celery, garlic, or herbs. And when they are in their fresh state, they give off an incredible aroma, and that's where they get the name aromatic from. When they become dried, that aroma diminishes greatly because it doesn't have the moisture content to be able to give off that smell. So fresh herbs is highly recommended. For a half sheet pan of focaccia bread, you're probably talking a little bit less than a tablespoon of chopped herbs. And like I mentioned, make sure that you don't mince them. That's a bad thing. It's what we call a rough cut, where you just take them off the stem and then you run your knife through it once or twice and you're set. Does that answer your question, Don?
Yeah. I've got
Chef,
some,
I will jump in real quick too, also talking about the herbs. If you don't know your oven very well, the oven is on 450. So if you're not for sure, then the herbs can burn. So you have to be really careful with that. Yeah,
absolutely. And when they're in a dried state, they have a tendency to burn a little bit quicker because they're halfway there already. So, all right, Don, that's a great question. I appreciate that. All right, ladies and gents, taking a look at our assignment this week for focaccia bread. Don't forget that great self-identification photo displaying the current week and current date. Make sure that you are dressed professionally, because we talked about that at the beginning of the class, and it's very, very important. Sanitation, don't drop the ball at this stage in the game. Once you get into industry, that's going to be something you're going to be worrying about every day. You need a nice picture of your mise en place, your dough mixed, your dough fermenting in a covered bowl, unless you're doing it in the refrigerator. That is an option as well. Dough after fermentation, covered with a nice piece of plastic wrap. Pan with olive oil spread evenly. We talked about putting some olive oil on the bottom of the half sheet pan. Dough on oil covered pan and stretched to the corners. We talked about not using a rolling pin. This is an artisanal style bread, so you're going to want to hand stretch it, pull it out to the edge. And then the focaccia before proofing, and then the focaccia after proofing, and then the focaccia baked. Remember the proofing process, you're going to want to double the level of the bread. So then you're going to show a picture of the focaccia cooling, sliced with a serrated knife to show the inside of the bread. Any questions about that? Don, did you have another question?
I did. When proofing, how should we cover it? I mean, can we do it with a towel, or does it have to be plastic wrap, or?
For your final proof, after you stretch it and do all that kind of good stuff, and with your oil on it, you can just lightly, or not oil on it, because the oil goes right before the oven, but you're going to cover it with just a light kitchen towel just to prevent it from drying out.
So like a dry towel?
A dry towel, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And preferably a light one.
All right.
So it won't retard the proofing process.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. Pamela, did you have a question? I saw your hand go up and then it went down. Pamela, what's up?
Hello, Chef.
Hi.
Yes, I did have a question, but I think you just answered it. Number 8 said dough and covered pan stretched to the corners, and then 9 focaccia before proofing. I thought that might be the same picture. However, I think once we cover it, it's going to be a different picture.
That's correct, because that's correct. So.
All right, that was it.
All right, thanks, Pamela. Any other questions, anyone? Chef Suzanne?
The list of photos in the presentation and the list of photos on the assignment page are different. There is that step that's missing. Step 4 in your slide calls for the dough mix for 4 minutes slow, 4 minutes fast. And kind of like this past week, we removed that. So you do not have to have a picture of your dough in a mixer because you're not required to use a mixer. So go by what's on the actual class page, because that one has actually been removed. So y'all are not even required to do that mixer, if that makes sense.
Good catch. There's all these little catches we're dealing with.
These folks, I'm telling you, these eagle-eyed students are quite amazing. And I'm like, hang on, I got to check. Oh, I see the difference.
This is what happens when everybody pays attention. Yeah, it's killing us. All right, ladies and gents, you guys rock. Don't forget, we want this class to be #1. We want #1 OTS, on-time submission. You can do it. So we want to get all the class to get all their assignments in no later than this Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. time. That also includes knowledge checks, both of them. And then make sure, I want to see this class. I've been bragging about you guys to the other instructors. I want to see you guys #1 with posting attendance. And the reason for this is kitchens are team efforts. If one guy drops the ball in the kitchen, then the whole kitchen suffers, because it means everybody else has to jump in and cover for them. And I know you guys can do it because this class has what it takes. Anybody has any questions, make sure you reach out, you talk to us. We are here for your support. Don't forget that all makeup assignments for the entire course are due no later than June 18th, which is the end of week 11. And make it happen, people. We are here to help you. Give us a call. Our numbers are on the right-hand side of the class page, and we're here for you. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.